Welcome viewers. You are with me Surbhi Unyal and I teach philosophy at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. Friends, we have been doing a special lecture series under the symbolic expressions on the introduction to philosophy. And in this series we have discussed various schools under the Indian tradition. In today's lecture, we will be discussing Cārvāka Philosophy. We have with us Ms. Manisha, who is going to interpret my lecture in sign language. So let's begin. Cārvāka belongs to the heterodox system or the Nastics, as it does not accept the authority of Vedas. So we have discussed this aspect in our very first lecture, where we discussed that the schools of Indian philosophy have been divided under the heterodox and the orthodox tradition. So belonging to whether they accept the authority of Vedas or not. So Cārvāka, belonging to the heterodox system, does not accept the authority of Vedas. It is also known as Lokayat. It is an ancient school of Indian philosophy that is often characterized as a materialistic and atheistic system. It is primarily concerned with the pursuit of sensual pleasure and the rejection of metaphysical concepts such as God, afterlife, and karma. It is one of the heterodox schools of thought in classical Indian philosophy. So it is also known as Indian materialism. And this is one of the oldest non-Vedic schools. Materialism is a name given to the metaphysical doctrine which holds that matter is the only reality. So this doctrine tries to examine mind as well as consciousness as the products of matter. So being a materialist, as for the materialist, only the matter is the reality. Therefore, Cārvāka, being a materialist, even explains mind and consciousness as the product of matter. Brihaspati is regarded as the traditional founder of the school. So Brihaspati is often equated with the teachers of the gods who propagated materialism among the asuras, so that they might be ruined. So Cārvāka, after whose name this school is so called, is said to be the chief disciple of Brihaspati. So there has been various theory as to who is the actual founder of the Cārvāka philosophy. So some say that it is the Brihaspati who is the founder of Cārvāka philosophy, while some say that it is the chief disciple of Brihaspati who is said to be the founder of the school. Well, according to another view, Cārvāka is the name of the sage who propounded materialism. And according to still another belief or another view, the word Cārvāka is not a proper name, but a common name given to a materialist, and it signifies a person who believes in the famous phrase, eat, drink and be merry. So the root charv means to eat. So if you look at the terminology, the Cārvāka, and look for the etymology of this term, the word charv means to eat, or a person who eats up his own words, or who eats up all the moral and ethical considerations, or a person who is sweet-tongued. So, charu vak, that means sweet tongue, or the person who has a sweet tongue. Another synonym which I have already mentioned of Cārvāka is lokayat, which means a commoner, and therefore by implication a man of low and unrefined taste. So with this, let's now come on to the very important theory in Cārvāka, which is the epistemological theory. So according to the Cārvāka school, perception or pratyaksh is the only valid means of knowledge. So according to Cārvāka philosophy, knowledge is situated within the body, a proposition supported by the principle of presence in presence and absence in absence. So if you look at Cārvāka epistemology in detail, you would see that the whole epistemological doctrine is basically situated within the body. And in order to describe that how it is situated in the body, Cārvāka has given this famous principle of presence in presence and absence in absence. So this principle is exemplified by the analogy of the color of a flower, which is only present when the flower itself is present. So the essence, or you can say that in essence, the color of the flower is deemed to exist within the flower and is absent in the flower's absence. So the knowledge of adherence to the states of presence and absence. So in order to understand this presence and absence, they have given this beautiful analogy of how colors are present in the flower. So they are present when there is a flower. So in order for color to exist, they need a flower onto which the colors will exist or will be present. So the color of the flower is deemed to exist within the flower, and if the flower is not present, even the color is not present. So similarly, Cārvāka argues for a parallel conformity between the body and knowledge, asserting that the relationship exhibits agreement in states of presence and absence. It is irrefutable that when the body, specifically sense organs, is present, knowledge is also present. And conversely, when the sense organ is absent, knowledge is also absent. So just like how the colors were in the flower, and if there is no flower, then there wouldn't be any colors. Similarly, in the case of body and knowledge, they are seeing this relationship between body and knowledge through the presence and absence relationship. So there they are saying that if the sense organ is present, then knowledge will be present. And if the sense organ is absent, then the knowledge is also absent. So for instance, suppose the visual sense organs intactness corresponds to the ability to see, whereas blindness aligns with the absence of this ability. through this consistent correlation in the states of presence and absence between the sense organs and knowledge, Cārvāka concludes that all knowledge is exclusively situated within the sense organs. So, if there is a person who has some visual disabilities, for that person that specific kind of knowledge will also be absent. So, if the person has the ability to see, he or she will be able to have that particular knowledge which is dependent on the visual sense organs. And if those sense organs are unable to do their work, or if there is any kind of disability, then there would be an absence of that particular kind of knowledge. So, this shows that all knowledge is basically situated within the sense organ, or what we were earlier calling the body. So, in specific, we can say that it is the sense organ. So, it is crucial to note that Cārvāka does not consider presence in presence and absence in absence as an argument, since they reject the validity of inference. Instead, Cārvāka establishes this proposition solely through perceptual evidence. Now, the validity, as just mentioned, that the Cārvākas do not accept the validity of inference. So, the validity of inference has been rejected by them. So, inference is said to be a mere leap in the dark. We proceed here from the known to the unknown, and there is no certainty in this. Though some inferences may turn out to be accidentally true, but this does not mean that it will be true in all the cases. So, Cārvāka criticize or reject the validity of inference by saying that it's just a mere leap in the dark. It can come out to be true, it can be false as well. So, it's just a mere leap in the dark from the known to the unknown. So, there is no certainty in this kind of knowledge. A general proposition may be true in perceived cases, but there is no guarantee that it will hold true even when it is unperceived or in the unperceived cases. Now, deductive inference is vitiated by the fallacy of petitio principii. So, Cārvākas even move further to talk specifically about inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. And in order to criticize or reject deductive reasoning or deductive inference, he then says that deductive inference commits the fallacy of petitio principii. What is petitio principii? Petitio principii, it is merely an argument in a circle. Since the conclusion is already contained in the major premises, the validity of which is not proved. Therefore, deductive inference is said to be committing the fallacy of petitio principii. Now, inductive inferences undertakes to prove the validity of major premise of deductive inference. But induction too is uncertain because it proceeds unwarrantedly from the known to the unknown. So, in order to distinguish true induction from simple enumeration, it is pointed out that the former, unlike the latter, is based on a causal relationship, which means invariable association or invariable concomitance, which is also known as vyapti. So vyapti therefore is the nerve of all inference. But the Cārvāka challenges this universal and invariable relationship of concomitance and regards it as a mere guesswork. So, vyapti, which is the invariable concomitance, is basically the nerve of the inference. That means the inference is actually dependent on the invariable concomitance. But Cārvāka is even questioning that relationship or invariable concomitance and saying that this vyapti also is a mere guesswork. So if vyapti, which is the nerve of the inference, itself is a guesswork, then we cannot say that inference is a valid means of knowledge. And perception does not prove this vyapti, nor can it be proved by inference. For inference itself is said to presuppose its validity. Testimony too cannot prove it. For firstly, testimony itself is not a valid means of knowledge. And secondly, if testimony proves vyapti, inference would become dependent on testimony, and then none would be able to infer anything by himself. Therefore, inference cannot be regarded as a valid source of knowledge. Induction is uncertain, and deduction is argument in the circle or petitio principii. So again, quickly repeating it, that we are talking about vyapti here, and how can we prove vyapti onto which the inference is dependent on. So here it is said that we cannot prove vyapti through perception, we cannot prove it through inference, we cannot even prove it through testimony, because if we prove vyapti through testimony, and testimony first of all it's not even considered as a valid means of knowledge by Cārvāka, and even if testimony proves vyapti, then inference would become dependent on testimony, and then we would not actually be able to infer anything by ourselves, because then it is already dependent on the testimony. So on the basis of these arguments, they establish that inference cannot be regarded as a valid source of knowledge. And then induction, inference is, they are saying it is uncertain, and deduction, they are saying that it is argument in circle. So now, according to Cārvāka, knowledge is generally divided into two classes, vis-a-vis apprehension, which is anubhav, and recollection, which is smaran. Apprehension is again divided into two classes, namely perception and assumption, which is also known as kalpana. Now, perception is the knowledge acquired by 5 sense organs, and these 5 sense organs give us corresponding knowledge. So like visual sense organ will be able to give us the knowledge of color, then auditory a sense organ would give us the knowledge of sound, and so on. So, if there is the capability of a particular sense organ which is functioning properly, then we will have corresponding knowledge that we can acquire from it. So, we can say that perception is that kind of knowledge that is acquired through the various 5, or you can say 5 sense organs. Now, valid knowledge or praman is the knowledge of object which are not contradicted by a subsequent knowledge. Sense organs are the instruments of valid knowledge. Thus, according to Cārvāka, all the other forms of knowledge like inferential knowledge and verbal testimony, they are invalid. Since all forms of knowledge except perception are invalid, they are of the nature of assumption. So, as we have mentioned that Cārvāka has divided knowledge into various kinds. Amongst that, we can say that it is only perception which is considered to be the knowledge, while the other kinds of so-called knowledges, or you can say means to knowledge, are considered to be assumptions. So, Cārvāka philosophy asserts that perception is reliable based on the generalization that most instances of perception are trustworthy. However, even if we concede that perception is a dependable source of knowledge, the critical question arises: upon what foundation can it be asserted that perception alone is a consistently reliable source of knowledge? So, with this question, we'll end our lecture here, and we will continue it in the next lecture, where we will discuss that how various other schools of Indian philosophy have criticized this idea of perception to be the only valid means of knowledge, and then what is the metaphysical notions held by the Cārvāka philosophy. So, continue with us to follow up further. Thank you.